lot of times, you know, a lot of times I think that the people view the Europeans as sort of a more common bloc, where they kind of move together following Brussels' lead, and I'm not sure how much that's really the case. It kind of, because Britain kind of does its own thing, and I'm not even sure how Europe they really are. I mean, I guess they're European, but when I visited England, it seemed very different than other parts of Europe that I've been to. Uh, does everybody in Europe kind of fall in line with what they're saying in Brussels, or do they kind of follow the French and German lead? Or, I know when I travel to Greece, Greeks don't seem to really give a shit about much of anything. They're just doing their thing. I mean, how's that? How do you guys get anything done?
Yeah, I mean, France and Germany like to think they run the EU, and to an extent they do. Most EU policies require all the countries to agree on it. And to make the EU exist, that requires a lot of compromise. And it's usually coming from countries that don't really care too much. They're kind of in it for the money. Um, Greece might be a great example of that. Italy might not be a bad one either.
Yeah,
Um, Poland has a little bit more history there, but also I think you can say they like to cash their EU checks.
yeah.
Um, and so they'll put up with a certain amount of nonsense so that they can get paid. And everybody else thinks that they're, you know, whatever, changing Europe and being progressive and whatever. And, the status quo is maintained. If you look at how the citizens are affected, very little.
Yeah, how much is, because we all think of Europe as being a very progressive place, but a lot of the Europeans I talk to are super traditional.
Yeah.
And when I visit Greece, they are really traditional. When I've traveled through Eastern Europe, they are even more really traditional. I now London, London was weird. Like the rest of England seemed to be pretty traditional, but London was, I mean, half the time when I was going through London, I kind of felt like I was in the Middle East because I saw so many people in burqas. It was very odd. London seemed like a completely different world from the rest of England, but once you went out into rural England, it was very traditional. It seemed, and yet, we're always told that Europe is so, progressive. Are they going down this progressive path like America is, or are they? What's
I
with that?
mean, like Berlin, I can't speak too much on other countries when it comes to specifics like that. I know Berlin's kind of, yeah, the German London. Sure, it's the capital, but no, exactly what you described. That it's not exactly German. They have very crazy ideas, and they're super, you know, super progressive. If you had to put a word on it, uh, there's one politician. I believe she's now the mayor of Berlin. Now, Berlin is kind of special because Berlin is a city-state in Germany.
What do you mean by a
And
city
so,
state?
so Germany has states. I want to say 16 or 18 of them.
Right.
Bavaria, Hessen, Baden-Württemberg, and so forth. Berlin is its own state, and it's not much bigger. I think it's only really the city Berlin. So Berlin is its own. Yeah. So if you're the mayor of Berlin, you're also kind of like
The
their equivalent of a governor of a state.
right.
It's kind of a two position. And of course, it's Berlin, so it's kind of an important place. That woman who just got that position used to be, before this recent election, which was this last fall, used to be, I want to say, the family minister, some bullshit like that. Her name
Right.
is Franziska Giffey, and she's from the Socialist Party, and there are few people that I would hate more than her in the current German government. And that's a position that's hard to get because a lot of these people are really
Uh,
works of art. Um, this woman copied somebody else's or most of somebody else's thesis to get a doctor title, was caught doing it, hasn't even given up her doctor title, or maybe she has at this point, but didn't really want to do that even, and then gets elected to be mayor of Berlin. And maybe I'm, nitpicking here, but just it's hard to describe what a piece of work some of these people are, and she stands close to the top of the list with her nonsense.
so
Um, but you talk about people being traditional. Yeah, Berlin is kind of crazy. A lot of the inner cities have these people. I think they're best described. I was talking to my mom. She was on the plane recently on a Lufthansa flight to American business class, and business class is arguably worse for the environment than economy class, and flying is known to be terrible. So it was interesting to see these young kids from places like Berlin and living off mommy and daddy's money in Munich in business class ordering the vegetarian meal to save the environment because everybody knows meat's bad for the environment. So while we're flying around the world in our plane, that's
That's
good for the environment. Let's have vegetarian options, so that we don't pollute more. Like that. That's the logic you're facing here.
right. Um, yeah, I have. Well, because I've noticed with, and I don't mean to shit on progressives. But I have noticed that some of the progressives that I've interacted with here in America were logically inconsistent with their, I'm super big on the environment, for example, and I'm constantly getting into arguments with environmentalists who don't understand environmental science, whereas I, studied a lot of environmental science in college, and I did a lot of like sustainable living kind of stuff, alternative energy research when I was in college, and a lot of it seems that a lot of the people who are the most passionate about their beliefs seem to know the least about what they're trying to how to accomplish what they want to accomplish, and I don't know if Germany's like that too. It seems that the big cities in America tend to be full of people like that who are very passionate about a topic that they know very little about. And whereas like in rural America, some of the biggest pragmatic environmentalists are the rural farmers because they have to be, because if they don't take care of their environment, they die. They starve, they go out of business. And so I think it's
For sure. I think a lot of the environmental activism is really misguided by people that have nothing better to do and get their bills paid for. The environment's a really important cause, but it's simply done by those people that fly around the world while eating a vegetarian
yeah.
meal, and that somehow solves the equation. And they'll offset the carbon emissions from their flights. That's great. They still took the plane, and they probably didn't have to.
Well,
Um,
and not to
fun
rag on German environmentalists, but aren't you guys shutting down your nuclear power plants, which are carbon neutral, and turning on coal plants instead? Because what the
Let
hell are
me
you
update
guys
you.
doing?
Well, but you see, this is green. This is Germany, and we care about the environment. So here's what we did. Atomic energy is great because it doesn't have real emissions and it's carbon neutral. But actually, nuclear energy is terrible. It's terrible and it's evil. So we're going to shut that down. It's not considered green. Gas, on the other hand, is almost green. It almost doesn't have emissions because it's better than coal. So gas is green. Gas is much better than nuclear energy. And now, since there's not enough gas, we have to use coal. We know that's not green, but it's still better than atomic energy. Welcome to the German logic.
I
I have no words. Yeah. There's 3 nuclear power plants left in Germany. They're all due to be shut down New Year's Eve of this year. One of them is actually pretty close to the airport in Munich. I see it every time you fly in. Um, yeah,
because
it's a mess.
because one of the things I used to joke with my mom about when she was still alive is that Germans seem to have a way of being able to logically maneuver themselves into the strangest justifications for things.
Because Germans like to listen. So you have all the listeners, and the people talking get very creative. It doesn't work like that in France because they'll fucking kill you. And even if you're right, they hate you. There's just this constant disagreement of authority.
Well, French people like to argue, don't they?
Oh yeah, and they like to set things on fire.
Yeah, because didn't a while back didn't they take like a front end loader full of manure and just like dump it into Macron's office?
I think they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's things like that. No, but you see, they have their views and
Oh, you kind of locked up there. Uh-oh. I hope we didn't lose you. Well, I think his internet died. So I'm going to pause this and
there's,
Oh, there you are.
you
You're sort of
know,
coming back. Your
it's
internet locked up.
like 20. Sorry about that. But yeah, I was saying my favorite thing to reference back to the German mentality with that, with listening to rules and not having individual thought. I was in Munich. I was probably 12 years old in the summer. Um, Small residential areas, small streets, 20-mile-an-hour zones. They're two-way, but there's no line in the middle. Like there's not many cars there,
Right.
and there's a traffic light, right? And I'm trying to cross the street, and the light's red, and there is not a car to be seen. Like you look down that street, there's nobody. You look down the other way, like nobody, none, zero. And so I cross the street, and the light is red.
Were you
And
driving
on
or
the
on
other
foot?
side, no, I was on foot. I was pedestrian. On the other side, two more pedestrians, a father and his child. The guy asks me, "What's wrong with me? Why did I cross in front of red in front of his kid? I'm setting a bad example for his kid." And I mean, I was 12. I think I was just like sorry, and I walked away. But like, I mean, I get that you don't want to train your kids to walk across the red light, but how could you blame me for doing that? You could even tell a kid, like, all right, like, don't cross on red, but like, there's nobody here, man. You gotta have your own thought. And they really think this, okay, the rule says you go when it's green. So when it's red, you don't go. And people who do that are bad people and they're breaking the rules. And they don't have their own interpretation of that.
Well, I know growing up in New York, I was taught to look for the cars. Mom and dad would tell me it doesn't matter if the light's red or green, a car can still kill you. So, you know,
Exactly.
pay attention to the car. And I've noticed this when I've traveled. I was in Moscow a while back. Back in, I don't know, probably September, and the light was red, but there's no cars. I was just waltzing on across the street like I was in New York. I wasn't paying attention, and my Russian friends were just aghast, like, "You're gonna die! What are you doing?" It's like there's no cars. What do you?
Yeah, you raised a really good point. It's this assumption also about these same people that if the light's green, there cannot be a car.
Right.
And that's so false. It's coming from New York. Like, you have to laugh at that.
Yeah, we just assume there's gonna be some asshole from New Jersey that's gonna try and kill us.
The most dangerous thing you could do in New York is go on the green and not look.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how people die every day.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it was funny. Your story reminded me of. And I don't particularly see Russians as following the rules kind of people. They kind of pay lip service to the rules, I think, and then they do their own thing when nobody's looking. But
I don't associate Russia with the absolute rule following
yeah, yeah,
blah
they're
blah.
they're 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 they're, they're not really. But it struck me as strange that these people in Moscow were like, concerned about my safety because I was, and it wasn't just like a couple people. It's like all these Russians were standing waiting for the light with no cars, and I'm just and just walked across the street. And the same thing, when I was in Ukraine, same thing when I was in London. It just seems that Europeans in general, even the people that you don't think of as being particularly rule following people, I think they're not quite as, not that I'm an anarchist or anything, but, and maybe it's just traffic laws. Maybe it's just because I grew up in New York, I have a general disregard for traffic laws when I'm on foot. But I noticed that was just really strange of just in all the different countries I've traveled in Europe, except for Greece, they don't seem to care about traffic laws in Greece, like not even when they're driving. Uh, and driving in Athens was very much like driving in New York City, except at 80 miles an hour. If you can
Okay.
imagine, yeah, if you can imagine like bumper to bumper traffic just going like a bat out of hell down the.
Yeah.
So Athens was insane. But other than Athens, where apparently nobody follows traffic laws, it seems that
I think Paris is kind of similar.
I've not been to Paris actually. I
They
almost
drive pretty wild there. That's an interesting place. Um, I only drive rental cars there now. I was just with because I have insurance through the credit card. I don't care what happens to the thing because I've seen too much shit go down there.
yeah. Well, and you've got a really nice car. So yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. I was crazy enough to drive it in Paris, and nothing happened to it. But I look back, I was like, I don't know, that seems like a bad idea. I'm just not gonna do that again.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, So Europe's really not. The people of Europe really aren't that unified about things that are going on.
They unified on the fact that all phones, including the iPhone, have to have a USB-C in after the next couple of years. After 2035, you can't have combustion engines and yada yada yada. And is that really going to happen? We don't know either. But yeah, aside from these big picture things, no, it's not a unified place. The currency is unified. That's cool up until you realize that the countries that make money are just paying it to people who don't. Um, cool. It's nice because of the Schengen system, but that's one thing. The EU takes a lot of credit for the Schengen agreement, and it's actually separate from the EU. The euro, that's part of the EU. It's a European
Right.
Union thing, and the currency. But this ability to travel between countries without border checkpoints and getting your passport stamped and the formalities, that has very little to do with the EU. That's a treaty. That's the Schengen agreement, and of course you can use that to get in and out of Switzerland. They're not in the EU.
Oh,
There you go.
I didn't realize Switzerland wasn't part of the EU.
No, they're not part of the EU, but they're part of the Schengen agreement.
Okay.
Interestingly, I only learned this recently when I went there. Ireland is part of the EU, but not part of the Schengen agreement. So you still have to go through passport control and customs, but they still have the euro. I thought that was interesting.
Huh. That is a little, and that's why they're having that border problem with I guess with Ireland and like Northern Trump. Isn't there like a part of Ireland that when Britain was breaking away from the EU that they were
Yeah, Northern Ireland's part of Britain, and then Ireland's Ireland, and they don't like each other.
Yeah, I imagine not. But they haven't liked each other for a long time though.
Yeah, they get drunk and they fight. That's always been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did like it, subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. You can also check out my website, bobtheorc.com, where you can download a free copy of my dad's book and some other things. Have a nice day. Goodbye.